Have you ever loved someone deeply, yet somehow felt completely alone while you were with them? Have you ever looked at the person you cared about and wondered, why do they pull away every time I get close? You shared your time. You shared your heart. You gave patience, understanding, and effort. But no matter how much love you gave, something always felt distant. One day they were warm, the next day they were silent. One moment they looked at you like you meant everything. The next moment they acted like they needed space from you. And slowly, without even realizing it, you started asking yourself painful questions. Was I too emotional? Did I expect too much? Was I not enough for them to stay? Loving an avoidant partner creates a kind of heartbreak that is difficult to explain because the relationship did not always feel bad. In fact, sometimes it felt beautiful. Sometimes it felt intense. Sometimes it felt like the connection was rare and special. That is what makes the pain so confusing, because part of you remembers the closeness, the late conversations, the laughter, the moments when they opened up just enough to make you believe the walls were finally coming down, but another part of you remembers the distance, the unanswered messages, the emotional silence, the feeling that you were standing outside a door that never fully opened. And the hardest part is this. You were not rejected all at once. You were rejected slowly, little by little, in small moments that made you question your own reality. Maybe you told yourself they were just stressed. Maybe you believed they needed time. Maybe you convinced yourself that if you loved them better, understood them more, or gave them more space, things would eventually change. So you stayed patient. You tried harder. You showed more understanding than most people would. Because when you love someone, you want to believe that love is enough. But loving an avoidant partner places you in a silent emotional battle. It is a place where closeness and distance exist at the same time. You feel connected, yet disconnected. You feel chosen, yet pushed away. And this emotional contradiction confuses the human mind in a powerful way. Our brain is wired to search for patterns. It tries to make sense of what it experiences. But in this kind of relationship, the signals are mixed. Warmth is followed by withdrawal. Closeness is followed by distance. So the mind begins to chase answers. You replay conversations in your head. You analyze every message. You wonder if one small moment caused everything to change. You think about the things you could have said differently. You think about the times you asked for reassurance. And slowly, without noticing, something dangerous begins to happen. You stop questioning the relationship and you start questioning yourself. You begin shrinking parts of who you are. You hold back your feelings so you do not overwhelm them. You silence your needs because you do not want to push them away. You become more careful with your words, more careful with your emotions, more careful with your expectations. And at some point, the relationship stops being a place where you feel safe. Instead, it becomes a place where you are constantly trying not to lose someone. This is the silent pain many people carry after loving an avoidant partner. Because when the relationship ends, the confusion does not end with it. The memories remain. The unanswered questions remain. You may still remember the way they looked at you during the good moments. You may still wonder if things could have been different. And sometimes the hardest truth to accept is this. You loved someone who struggled with closeness. Not because you were unworthy of love. Not because you were too much. But because emotional distance was something they learned long before you ever entered their life. Understanding this changes everything. Because healing does not begin when you forget the relationship. Healing begins when you finally understand it. When you stop blaming yourself for someone else's emotional walls. When you stop believing that your love was the problem. And in this video, something powerful is going to happen. You are going to understand why loving an avoidant partner affects the human mind so deeply. You are going to discover why this experience leaves so many people feeling confused, rejected, and emotionally drained. But most importantly, by the end of this video, you will begin to see your story in a completely different way. Not as a story of failure, not as a story of rejection, but as the beginning of a deeper understanding of love, boundaries, and your own emotional strength. Because the truth is this: the pain you feel right now is not the end of your story. It is the moment where clarity begins. And once you understand what really happened inside that relationship, healing becomes possible. Once clarity begins, another powerful realization slowly follows. What if the distance you experienced was never really about you? What if the emotional walls you faced were built long before you ever entered that person's life? Many people walk away from these relationships carrying heavy self-doubt. They assume they somehow caused the withdrawal. They believe they asked for too much affection, too much reassurance, or too much presence. But human psychology tells a different story. Avoidant behavior is not created inside the relationship. It is usually learned much earlier. For some individuals, emotional closeness once felt unsafe. In their early experiences, vulnerability may have led to disappointment, criticism, rejection, or pressure. Over time, the mind develops a protective strategy. The brain quietly learns a rule: distance equals safety. So whenever intimacy grows, another force inside them activates. It is not always conscious. It is an automatic response. Their nervous system interprets closeness as a potential threat, even when nothing dangerous is happening. This is why their actions often feel confusing. At the beginning, they may appear charming, attentive, and engaged. In the early stage of connection, everything feels light. There is curiosity. There is excitement. Emotional investment is still low, so their internal alarm stays quiet. But as attachment deepens, the situation changes. The moment feelings become real, something shifts inside their psychological system. Intimacy begins to feel heavy rather than comforting. Expectations start to feel overwhelming rather than natural. The bond that once felt exciting now begins to trigger pressure. So the mind searches for relief. Sometimes that relief appears as silence. Sometimes it appears as sudden need for independence. Sometimes they focus intensely on work, hobbies, or personal space. These actions are not always meant to hurt the other person. Often they are attempts to regain emotional control. But from the outside, the experience feels deeply painful. Because when someone cares about connection, distance does not feel like protection. It feels like rejection. The more one person tries to close the emotional gap, the more the avoidant partner may step back. This creates a cycle that slowly becomes exhausting. One person reaches out for reassurance, the other responds with withdrawal. Then the first person tries even harder, hoping effort will repair the growing distance. They communicate more. They show greater patience. They attempt to prove their loyalty and dedication. Yet the harder they try, the more the other individual may feel overwhelmed. This pattern is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in relationships. Love alone cannot dissolve psychological defenses that took years to form. No amount of kindness, sacrifice, or emotional giving can force someone to feel safe with intimacy if their mind has been trained to fear it. And this is where many compassionate people lose themselves, because they believe persistence will eventually unlock the other person's heart. They believe if they remain patient enough, caring enough, understanding enough, something will finally change. So they keep investing emotional energy. They explain their feelings carefully. They avoid conflict to keep peace. They adjust their expectations again and again. But gradually something inside them becomes tired. Not tired of loving, tired of chasing closeness that never fully arrives. The human heart is designed for connection. It thrives in environments where affection, communication, and presence flow naturally between two people. When those elements remain inconsistent for long periods, emotional exhaustion begins to appear. And this exhaustion often hides behind quiet thoughts. Maybe they just need more time. Maybe things will improve later. Maybe if I become more understanding, the situation will stabilize. These thoughts keep many people stuck longer than they should be, because hope is powerful. Hope convinces the mind to stay in situations that no longer nourish the soul. But understanding psychological patterns does something important. It replaces confusion with awareness. When you recognize that someone's withdrawal is connected to internal defense mechanisms rather than your worth as a partner, the entire narrative changes. Their inability to remain emotionally present is not evidence that you were unlovable. It simply reveals that they were fighting a battle inside themselves, a battle between desire for connection and fear of vulnerability. Many avoidant individuals genuinely want closeness. They want companionship, affection, and partnership just like anyone else. But the moment emotional intensity increases, their protective instincts react automatically. So they create space. That space may look like independence, distraction, or emotional silence. Yet beneath it often exists a complicated internal struggle. They may not fully understand themselves. Still, Recognizing this truth does not mean accepting emotional absence as normal. Understanding behavior does not mean tolerating pain that slowly erodes your well-being. Awareness simply frees you from carrying responsibility that never belonged to you. Because one of the greatest psychological burdens people carry after these experiences is misplaced guilt. They believe they somehow failed to love correctly. They believe they should have been more patient, less expressive, or less emotionally present. But relationships are not meant to operate under constant restraint. Authentic connection allows two individuals to exist fully without fear that their needs will drive the other away. And when that balance is missing, no amount of self-adjustment can permanently repair the foundation. Recognizing this truth may feel uncomfortable at first because it challenges the belief that you could have saved the relationship if you had simply done something differently. But it also offers freedom. Freedom from endless self-analysis. Freedom from the exhausting search for hidden mistakes. Freedom from the belief that you were the reason intimacy never stabilized. What you experienced was not a lack of love from your side. It was a clash between two emotional systems moving in opposite directions. One system seeking closeness, the other trying to protect itself from it. And when these two patterns collide without awareness, confusion becomes inevitable. Yet this understanding is only the beginning of the healing process, because once the mind stops blaming itself, another deeper challenge begins to surface: the emotional impact left behind, the quiet wounds that develop when someone repeatedly feels unseen, uncertain, and emotionally alone inside a relationship. And that is where the next part of the journey begins. Once the mind understands the pattern, another reality slowly rises to the surface. Knowledge explains the behavior, but it does not erase the emotional impact left behind. Because when a relationship repeatedly moves between warmth and separation, it leaves marks that are not immediately visible. The connection may be over, but the emotional imprint remains inside the person who tried to hold it together. Many people walk away from these experiences carrying a quiet heaviness they cannot easily explain. Outwardly, life continues, days pass, responsibilities return, conversations with friends happen. But somewhere inside, something feels unsettled. There is a strange mixture of sadness and confusion. Part of the mind still tries to understand how something that once felt meaningful could slowly turn into emotional uncertainty. The memory of the good moments still exists. Those moments were real. The laughter, the closeness, the conversations that felt genuine. Those memories do not disappear simply because the relationship ended. But alongside those memories lives another feeling, a lingering sense of emotional imbalance. Over time, loving someone who remains distant can slowly reshape how a person sees themselves. At first, the changes are small. A person might begin to hesitate before expressing feelings. They might question whether their emotional needs are too heavy for others. They may start analyzing their behavior more than usual. Instead of naturally sharing their thoughts, they become cautious. Instead of speaking freely, they begin filtering their words. The mind quietly learns to adapt in order to avoid creating distance again. But this adaptation has consequences. When someone constantly adjusts themselves to maintain a fragile connection, they slowly move further away from their own emotional center. Needs become quieter. Expectations become smaller. Desires for reassurance or closeness begin to feel like burdens rather than natural parts of love. And without realizing it, a person begins carrying responsibility that was never theirs to hold. They start believing that their presence may have been overwhelming. They replay past conversations, searching for signs that they were too expressive or too vulnerable. The brain continues scanning old memories, trying to identify the moment when everything began to shift. This mental replay can continue long after the relationship has ended, because the human brain dislikes unfinished emotional stories. When something ends without clear closure, the mind keeps searching for answers. It wants to understand why the connection could not remain stable. It wants to find logic in something that often had none. But while the mind searches for explanations, another deeper wound quietly grows. Self-worth begins to weaken, not in obvious ways at first, but through subtle thoughts that appear during quiet moments. A person may begin to wonder whether they will always be too much for others. They may fear that their desire for closeness will push people away in future relationships. They may even feel embarrassed about how deeply they cared. These thoughts do not appear because they are true. They appear because repeated emotional distance slowly teaches the brain to associate vulnerability with rejection. The heart offered openness. The response it often received was silence or withdrawal. Over time, this pattern trains the nervous system to expect disconnection whenever closeness appears. So even after the relationship ends, the body remembers the tension. The mind becomes alert, it tries to protect itself from future disappointment. But here is the truth that many people need to hear. Your desire for emotional connection was never the problem. Your need for presence, communication, and warmth was never excessive. These are not weaknesses. They are fundamental parts of healthy human bonding. Every person deserves to feel emotionally safe with the individual they love. Safety means not constantly guessing how the other person feels. Safety means not worrying that expressing affection will create distance. Safety means knowing that vulnerability will be met with understanding rather than retreat. When those conditions are missing, the human heart begins to experience loneliness even while standing beside someone. That kind of loneliness is particularly painful because it happens inside a relationship that was supposed to offer comfort. Instead of feeling supported, a person often feels invisible. Instead of feeling secure, they feel uncertain. And over time, that uncertainty quietly drains emotional energy. The person who once felt confident in love may begin doubting their instincts. They may question their judgment about people. They may even lose trust in their own emotional awareness. But healing begins when a person recognizes that these internal wounds were not created by their capacity to love. They were created by a dynamic where emotional needs were consistently left unmet. Acknowledging this truth is not about blaming the other individual. It is about restoring balance inside your own understanding. You are not asking for something unrealistic. You are asking for a relationship where closeness felt natural rather than difficult. You were asking for reassurance that did not need to be chased. You were asking for emotional presence that did not disappear during moments of vulnerability. These expectations are not excessive. They are the foundation of meaningful connection. And recognizing this truth allows something powerful to happen. Instead of shrinking yourself to fit the memory of that relationship, you begin expanding again. You begin allowing your emotions to exist without apology. You begin accepting that your capacity to care deeply was never something to hide. The experience may have left scars, but it also revealed something important about who you are. You are someone capable of loyalty, someone capable of patience, someone capable of giving sincere love. Those qualities are not flaws. They are strengths that simply need to exist in the right environment. Because the problem was never that you loved too deeply. The problem was that your love was placed in a situation where emotional safety could not fully grow. And once this realization becomes clear, another transformation begins to take place. The focus slowly shifts. Instead of asking why the relationship failed, a new question appears. What kind of love truly supports the person you are becoming? And the answer to that question opens the path toward rebuilding yourself and moving forward with greater strength. When that new question begins to appear, something important starts changing inside you. Instead of constantly looking backward, your attention slowly turns forward. For a long time, your energy may have been spent trying to understand what went wrong. You examined memories. You searched for hidden reasons. You tried to solve an emotional puzzle that never seemed to have a clear answer. But real recovery does not happen when every detail of the past is perfectly explained. Real recovery begins the moment you turn your focus toward yourself again. Because during that relationship, much of your emotional strength was directed outward. Your thoughts often revolved around their reactions, their moods, their distance, and their return. Your mind tried to predict their behavior so you could keep the connection from falling apart. That constant mental effort quietly drained your inner resources. Now, the direction must change. Instead of studying their behavior, you begin understanding your own needs again. Instead of chasing clarity from another person, you begin creating clarity within yourself. This shift may feel unfamiliar at first. After spending so much time adjusting to someone else's emotional patterns, reconnecting with your own voice can feel strange. But slowly, something powerful happens when you give yourself permission to listen to your feelings without judgment. You start noticing truths that were once ignored. You remember the moments when your intuition tried to speak, the times when something inside you felt uneasy, but you pushed the feeling aside, the moments when your heart quietly asked for more stability, but your mind convinced you to be patient a little longer. Your intuition was never trying to sabotage the relationship. It was trying to protect your well-being. The human mind carries an internal guidance system that senses emotional imbalance long before logic understands it. But when love is involved, people often silence that guidance because they want the connection to succeed. Now that the relationship has ended, that inner voice deserves to be heard again. Listening to it will not make you weak. It will make you wiser. Because healing is not only about letting go of someone who could not meet you emotionally. Healing is also about rebuilding the relationship you have with yourself. This process begins with self-respect. Self-respect means recognizing that your emotional needs deserve space. It means understanding that your desire for reliability, affection, and openness is not something that should be negotiated away. Healthy love never demands that you abandon your emotional truth in order to keep someone close. Healthy love creates an environment where both individuals feel comfortable expressing themselves honestly. There is consistency, there is presence, there is mutual effort. You do not feel like you are constantly proving your value. You do not feel like you must earn attention through endless patience. Instead, the connection flows naturally between two people who both choose to participate fully. When you begin to understand this, another powerful realization forms. The relationship you experienced was not proof that love is painful. It was proof that emotional compatibility matters. Two individuals can care about each other deeply and still struggle to create a balanced connection. Their internal patterns may simply move in different directions. One person moves toward closeness, the other moves away from it. Without awareness, that difference creates friction that slowly wears down the bond. Recognizing this truth helps release a heavy burden many people carry, the belief that they must change themselves to make future relationships work. But the goal is not to transform yourself into someone who asks for less. The goal is to choose connections where your authentic emotional style is welcomed rather than feared. This shift in perspective changes how you approach the future. Instead of chasing attention, you begin valuing consistency. Instead of ignoring early signs of emotional distance, you pay attention to them with calm awareness. Instead of believing patience alone will fix everything, you recognize that mutual effort is necessary for a relationship to grow. And perhaps most importantly, you begin trusting yourself again, trusting that your feelings are valid, trusting that your intuition deserves attention, trusting that your heart is capable of recognizing the difference between emotional uncertainty and genuine connection. This trust does not return overnight. It develops gradually as you treat yourself with the same care you once gave someone else. You speak to yourself with compassion instead of criticism. You allow your emotions to exist without labeling them as weakness. You give yourself time to rebuild the confidence that may have been shaken by the past. And as this process continues, something beautiful begins to appear. Your identity becomes stronger than the experience that once hurt you. You are no longer defined by the confusion you went through. You are defined by the wisdom you gained from it, because every difficult relationship carries lessons hidden inside it. Lessons about boundaries, lessons about emotional awareness, lessons about the type of connection that truly supports your growth. When you apply those lessons, the pain you once felt slowly transforms into guidance. Guidance that helps you create healthier relationships in the future. Guidance that reminds you to choose environments where your presence is appreciated, not tolerated. Guidance that encourages you to build connections where communication, trust, and emotional availability exist naturally. The chapter you went through may have been difficult, but it also revealed the depth of your capacity to love. And that capacity is not something to suppress. It is something to protect. Because the right relationship will not make you question whether your heart is too open. The right relationship will show you that your openness is one of your greatest strengths. And when that kind of connection enters your life, you will not need to chase it, analyze it, or struggle to maintain it. You will simply recognize it, because by then you will understand the difference between love that drains your spirit and love that allows it to grow.